At the Syntaur shop in New Braunfels, Texas, even though we don't do any outside repairs, we deal with a crazy number of broken synthesizers. Some of these keyboards go through the chop shop so that our customers have access to long obsolete parts. Other keyboards get repaired fairly quickly and then go into our showroom for sale. And then there are the ones that sit for months or even years while we develop grand plans to somehow bring them back to life. My wife, the sensible one, says, "We've had it all so long. Is it worth anything?" I, the sensible one, counter with, "This is valuable stuff that will soon turn into treasures." Hi, I'm Sam Mims, and in this episode of Synth Wizards, we're going to take one of those big broken things and see if we can work some keyboard alchemy. If we play our cards right, maybe we can turn this into synthesizer gold. Here at Syntaur, we live to bring old synthesizers back to life. We find vintage keyboards wherever we can, and our crew restores them back to their original splendor. We also supply parts to tens of thousands of customers all around the world so that they can restore and repair their own keyboards. At our shop in Texas, we have on hand parts for the synths used by pros from the 1960s all the way to today's brand new keyboards. Our inside and out knowledge has made us known as the Synth Wizards. Back a few episodes ago, I took the family on a vacation to Utah. They weren't very surprised to learn that on the drive back home, there just happened to be a keyboard in Arizona that I wanted to pick up. I'd been fishing for that thing for about a year, and finally worked a deal with the seller.
Well, folks, we're here in an undisclosed location in Phoenix, Arizona, picking up some kind of special keyboard that's not working at all.
It is a special keyboard. It's the holy grail of polyphonic synthesizers. It's a Yamaha CS-80, and we're spending thousands of dollars to buy a keyboard that doesn't work. It's the biggest purchase we've ever made for a single keyboard, but on the other hand, if and when we get it refurbished and working, it'll be the biggest sale we've ever made for a keyboard, so it'll bring the highest dollar. And these are very rare and very wonderful, so I'm even more excited than Cody is. That's right, a short while later, we were handing over the money and wheeling 220 pounds of analog goodness into the Synthmobile. But it was a big gamble. The last time it had been turned on, it started smoking from somewhere inside, so it was quickly turned back off and then parked in a closet for years. What worried me more than the smoke itself was the location of the smoke. It was obviously not coming from the power supply, which would likely have been an easy fix. Instead, it was coming from deep in the heart of this beast, where there are some integrated circuit chips which were made specifically for this one synthesizer. Those chips are so rare and sought after that a single IC can sell for over $1,000. If any of those chips were toasted, I'd have to admit to Mary that this is one very expensive piece of junk. And for anyone brave enough to operate on a CS-80, beware that its integrated circuits are more vulnerable to damage than the components in most other synthesizers. If a loose circuit board touches against the wrong thing, it can easily short things out and fry those expensive chips. Or if you just touch some of the circuitry on a dry day and send a spark of static electricity into the CS-80, you could render it deceased. With those disconcerting thoughts, it seemed like a good idea to simply park this behemoth for a spell while we learned more about it and carefully figured out how we should proceed. So, let's get to the learning. The CS-80 and I started out about the same time in the music business. In 1977, I was fresh out of high school and had started playing in bands. I could barely afford a Univox compact piano, which was about the cheapest thing you could get back then that had keys and made noise. When Yamaha announced their new flagship CS-80, a polyphonic analog synthesizer, let's just say that they were aiming for a different demographic. It had a price tag of about $7,000. That amount of money would have almost bought you a brand new Corvette. Or if you prefer Chevettes, you could have bought 2 of those, with hundreds of dollars left over for gas and leisure suits. No, CS-80s were not showing up in bar bands. Less than 700 were made, and they were being sent off to folks like Vangelis, who featured it prominently in his soundtrack music for Chariots of Fire and Blade Runner, or to performers like Stevie Wonder, who toured with 4 CS-80s. And were they worth the money? Well, Vangelis said that the CS-80 was the most important synthesizer in his career and was the best analog synthesizer design there has ever been. Those are some heavy words for this heavy keyboard. So let's take a look at just what makes the CS-80 so wonderful. First of all, if you touch the keys, you immediately notice how nice the action feels. Each key is long, like a piano key, and pressing these down feels much more natural and responsive than a cheap plastic keybed with short keys. The CS-80 keys respond to velocity, and every key has its own aftertouch sensor. Even 40 years later, very few keyboards offer polyphonic aftertouch, and the ones that do don't feel as nice as the CS-80. Touching the panel controls gives you further tactile feedback that this is a quality instrument. The sliders and switches feel smooth and over-engineered, like this thing was built to last 2 lifetimes. The panel controls are there in duplicate. That's because there is a Synth 1 program and a Synth 2 program that are always there for layering or cross-fading between them. Each is a 2-oscillator, 8-voice polyphonic synthesizer. You can select sounds from the 28 program buttons, 1 for Synth 1 and 1 for Synth 2. 22 of these are presets that are hardwired. They can't be edited. But there are also 2 that select the current panel settings, plus 4 user memory presets. Now, how are those user presets stored in an instrument that was built before ROM and RAM even existed? Well, there's a secret compartment under this trapdoor, and inside is basically a mini-me. No, not a mini-me, but 4 tiny versions of the CS-80 front panel. You can set all of these tiny sliders to be identical recreations of your favorite panel settings. And if you look really closely with a magnifying glass, in the corner of this compartment is an even tinier trapdoor with 4 mini-me's. Well, not really, but maybe we'll work on a mod for that.
You're gonna have to turn it. There you go.
Just don't get my socks because they're not matching.
Alright.
Once I had built up enough courage, I went over to Syntaur North to poke around inside of our broken CS-80. This building is basically keyboard purgatory. It houses all of the synthesizers and racks that are either going to get restored to their former glory or parted out. Which direction would our CS-80 be going? I laid it on the floor to check the power supply fuses and to see if there might be any obvious visual clues as to why this thing had taken up the smoking habit. The power supply is massive, and it has 3 fuses right on top. One of those fuses is missing. The other 2 tested good. I didn't see any obvious signs of damage, so maybe this thing will be repairable. The worst cosmetic flaw on this synthesizer is a broken key, which has been glued back together. We recently came across some CS-80 keys, so while I have it open, I'm going to get that key replaced. Okay, to swap a key out in this, you can see the plastic key is mounted on a very long bar, and so we've got to remove this bar, which keeps the keys in place, and this one as well. And so I'll just do that with an electric drill. Now the way the key mechanism works is when you press a key, the back of the key comes up. And you can see it lifts up 2 leaf contacts there for each note. There you go. By pressing down with my thumb on the top of those contacts and pushing the key forward at the same time, I can get the back end of that around those contacts, and then I can lift the key out. And we'll get rid of this broken one. And then the same thing in reverse. For the new key, we'll take it, slide the front of it in, push it as far forward as we can go. We can drop it in place, and there we are. The last time this CS-80 was used, the previous owner turned it on, saw it smoke from this area, turned it off, and that was kind of it. It got stored away for a long time. So when we were cleaning it up yesterday, we found something that we hope might have been the source of the short that caused the smoke. We cleaned that up, we've replaced the fuse, and so now is the moment of truth to turn this thing on and see if it smokes. Looking good so far. The lights come on and there's no smoke, so it's time to hook it up to a speaker. Is it actually going to make sound? Well, not yet, it's not. I can barely hear something. Well, this thing is going to need some electronic repair, and hopefully it won't require any extinct IC chips. But for now, I'm determined to keep the momentum going. So we started taking care of some other issues. With the CS-80 powering on and struggling to make some noises, we took stock of our situation. We could spend lots of time fighting this thing, hoping we don't zap anything, or we could call on a CS-80 superhero for help. We called for the superhero.
To the Synthmobile, Carlos.
Well, folks, we're here at an undisclosed location outside Phoenix, Arizona, getting some special keyboard fix that's not working at all.
A continuation of the Yamaha CS-80 saga. We're taking it to Buena Park, California, where Yamaha exists, and we're going to get one of their techs that works on the vintage Yamaha gear to take a look at this and get it all the way working perfectly. Yep, we're driving all the way to Southern California to get this CS-80 serviced by an expert, someone who has knowledge and experience that goes beyond what's in the service manual. He's the one who Yamaha calls on when they need any of their own vintage synthesizers serviced. So we turned this beast over to the master and set up camp in Orange County. Between the DX1 in our last episode, and now the CS-80, we have surely been enamored by vintage Yamaha synthesizers. and Yamaha as a company is one of my favorites to do business with. So while the tech is sussing out the CS-80, we took the opportunity to visit Yamaha's massive complex right down the road. We're here at the Yamaha headquarters in Buena Park, California, and we're hoping to get a sneak peek inside the Synth Space, which is a museum that Yamaha has set up for all their classic and modern day synthesizers. Wow, we're locked out.
Hi.
Whoa.
Wow. Come on in.
Wow.
I'm Keith Hirsch, and I'm the marketing development specialist here at Yamaha for synthesizers. So.
And I'm Nate Cheddar. I'm the synth marketing manager here in the U.S., and this is the Synth Space.
Two CS-80s? Oh,
No.
Oh, okay, one's a 60?
60.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, the synths are taking over. We're running out of space, actually.
Nice.
More synths than space. Yeah.
GS2?
GS2. Yeah, we found that. It was just laying around.
I heard that's kind of what happened with the CS-80, huh?
With one of the CS-80s, yes.
Yeah, that's a nice day when you just find a CS-80 lying around.
We had one of our employees had this, and he donated that to us, YC45. One of the Leslie for it too. And this is from another one of our employees. He had this, used to gig with that SY2 for years and years.
This is stuff you don't see much of.
And we have a lot of fellow Texans.
Really?
We've got stuff. We got this CP80 from a guy in Dallas.
Well, we have a lot of room in Texas to
Yeah,
store this stuff.
to store the big stuff.
What a cool place. The early CS collection brings me back to the first synthesizer I ever bought new, the CS-5. And of course, there's the CS-80. The Yamaha VL1 demo is extraordinary. This is a physical modeling synthesizer that duplicates the physics of how blown tubes resonate and produce sound.
The most amazing thing about this instrument is it behaves like a physical product, or a physical instrument. So even the way a brass instrument, you change the embouchure, and like you think of a bugle, there's no valves to change notes, so you have to change your embouchure. And you hear the notes that goes through. That's the third worst I've ever played that.
That's great.
I love it.
In a surprisingly short time, the tech had dived into the ocean of wires and circuit boards, removed another metal tang that may have shorted things out, replaced 4 transistors and a proprietary Yamaha chip, and had the CS-80 playing notes. The bad news is that several of the notes were not responding to aftertouch, all of the sliders and switches need cleaning, and this synthesizer definitely needs to be calibrated. And those loose metal tangs? They keep the keys from wobbling side to side, and many of them have long since broken away. There's a lot of work ahead, and we're not sure how or even if some of these things can be fixed. But to simply have the CS-80 playing notes is a huge step forward. Now it's time to load this beast up and get it back to Syntaur headquarters, where we'll do everything we can to finish up this restoration. Syntaur is only open for half a day on Saturdays, and Gerald doesn't work at all on the weekends, but every now and then he pops in on a Saturday for a little bit. So this past Saturday he popped in, started puttering around, started working, kept on working, said he's going to lunch, he'll see me after lunch, came back after lunch. I thought, my, what a dedicated worker he is to come in on his day off. And then about 3 o'clock in the afternoon, when no one else was here except me, he said, where is everyone? Why isn't anyone working? I said, you know it's Saturday, right? And he wouldn't believe me. He thought it was Friday. And so today, it's really Monday, and so we played a little trick on him. When Gerald was about to drive up, we closed the blinds, turned out the lights, and everyone hid. Hey, what you doing here on a Sunday?
Then it's Sunday again, Saturday again.
You going to see now?
I've been seeing trying to manage it. Are you sure? Tuesday yet? The damn fools that made me work on Saturday and Sunday, they trick my ass, tell me it's Tuesday.
Hi, this is Kayla, and if you like Synth Wizards, click on like and subscribe so you don't miss a single episode. And if you'd like to see more episodes of Synth Wizards more often, you can help make that happen and get some cool benefits as well. Click here to visit our Patreon page.
With the CS-80 back in Texas, we set it up in our showroom where we could have easy access to it from all sides, and began figuring out how we might tackle each of its remaining issues. It's a unique project because it's pretty much a given that there will not be parts available for this thing. There's a broken pot on the back panel, there may be a slider that needs repairing, several bulbs for the program buttons are out, several keys need the aftertouch repaired, many keys have broken guides, and we have no stand for this 200-pound monster. We're going to tackle the easy things first, build up our confidence and get to know this CS-80 a little better. Several program buttons don't light up when they're selected, and replacing those bulbs shouldn't be difficult. And this is one part that we were able to find. You can gently pry the switch cap off, and then the bulb, sitting in a rubber housing, simply pulls out. The bulb itself can then be slipped out of the rubber housing. A new bulb goes in, and the leads are threaded through the holes in the rubber. Trim the excess wire, reinsert the rubber housing into the switch, and let there be light. The slide pots were another hurdle. After 4 decades, all of them were dirty, so we built a special nozzle for our air compressor that would fit down into the slider to loosen up any dust and grit that had accumulated there. After a good spray of compressed air, we then vacuumed out each slide pot. A shot of deoxit took care of any remaining trouble. But one pot in particular just wasn't responding to our TLC. The VCF level on Synth 2 still has a dead spot when we try to adjust the filter. Either it has some really stubborn gunk inside, or worse, it has a damaged carbon track that's no longer making contact at a certain point. So Carlos removed this slide pot so that we can disassemble it to get directly to the source of trouble. The metal body of the pot has several tabs that bend around the bottom and hold the whole thing together. By carefully straightening these tabs, you can pull the pot apart, remove the bottom where the wiper contacts the carbon track, and then clean the carbon track directly with a swab and some deoxit. We're keeping our fingers crossed because if this doesn't do it, we'll have to replace the slide pot. And I don't know of any place on the planet that sells CS-80 sliders. With the slide pot cleaned and reassembled, it's going back into the CS-80, and wouldn't you know it, it's still got a dead spot. I managed to find a slide pot that should work, but it didn't have brackets on the end for mounting it to the front panel. So I passed it on to Gerald, and the next morning he had metal tabs epoxied to the ends of the pot. This did the trick. It all worked perfectly. When you're restoring a vintage synthesizer and replacement parts aren't available, creativity can make all the difference. Now that we've got the sliders working well, it's time to go after the keybed. And there are a lot of wobbly keys and some where the aftertouch works flaky or doesn't work at all. And to be honest, I'm not real sure if we're going to be able to fix those things. But Carlos is ready to tear into this, so we'll see what happens. The next big hurdle is one that I'm really worried about, and that is to somehow replace all of the metal key guides that have broken away. 12 of them have snapped off over the years of playing, and 2 of them are what we found wandering about inside the CS-80, shorting out electronics. These guides have a felt jacket, and they keep the keys aligned correctly. Without them, the ivories wobble around horribly.
And I mean, you can tell by feeling, but once you actually get eyes on it, then it kind of becomes more apparent.
The only way to get the keys working smoothly again is to somehow fabricate something to replace all of those broken guides. So we began pondering what sort of metal fabrication might work and how we might attach it. And then the next thing I know, Gerald has brought in a couple of pieces he made from a recycled ARP keybed. We just need to temporarily disconnect a few wires to get these new metal pieces into place, but it looks like it'll work perfectly. And now it's time to tackle the aftertouch. A couple of keys did not respond to aftertouch at all. A few others did, but only marginally.
They weren't responsive. It just wasn't as responsive as I'd like it to be.
Yeah.
As far as I don't know what you would call that, delicate or
responsive.
Yeah, responsive. Yeah, it just required a lot more pressure. But you can see, the life of a CS-80.
The black rubber piece underneath each key has a concave surface on the bottom, and that surface is conductive. As the key is pressed down harder, that concave surface makes more contact with the circuit board underneath, triggering more aftertouch. The whole underside of this keybed is terribly dirty.
That's the actual pressure strip right there. Okay, look, and you see?
Yeah, some nasty goo in there.
You see the goo, but you can also see the contacts on it.
Mm-hmm. It looks like someone spilled a soda or something that seeped underneath the aftertouch pads, precluding them from making good contact with the circuit board underneath. Even with the rubber aftertouch contacts all cleaned up, a couple of notes still won't respond at all. It turns out that the circuit board was damaged also. The traces leading to the aftertouch surfaces were broken. So Gerald took the thinnest strand of wire he could find and bridged the gaps.
All yours now.
All mine.
You said what you're supposed to do. Now you gotta do it.
I'll take care of it from here.
With the keys back into place, this keybed feels fabulous. Instead of being wobbly and clunky, now it's tight and smooth, and the aftertouch works exactly as it should. I'm super proud of Gerald and Carlos for getting the impossible done. With the electronics working and the keybed feeling as good as new, it's time to calibrate this beast. And that starts with making sure the power supply voltages are just right. This is a pretty easy step, and a good way to ease into the rest of the calibration process, which is complicated and tedious and taxing on the brain. To get the voices calibrated, you raise up a massive rack containing lots of different circuit boards. 8 of these are voice boards for the Synth 1 section, and another 8 are voices for the Synth 2 section. Each of these voice boards has a multitude of trim pots, and they all need to be set according to a very specific step-by-step process. To calibrate the voices, I needed some kind of a roadmap, so I laid down a piece of tape and marked where each voice board was located. Then I had to identify the correct trim pot on each voice board for each step in the process. Once I had a good understanding of which pot to turn at which step, I then had to make sure I was triggering the correct voice to match the correct trim pot on the correct circuit board. This can give you a headache even before you start making a single adjustment. We did find that one voice did not want to cooperate like it should. We could almost get it tuned, but not quite. This could be due to a resistor or a trim pot being slightly out of spec. So we adjusted for this by adding a resistor to that specific voice board. After several hours of adjusting trim pots and annoying everyone else in the building, I finally got this CS-80 playing nicely in tune. The one thing we're still missing with this CS-80 is the stand. And for that, I turned to Tim and his crew at Proline Custom Aluminum in San Antonio. When we needed some unique eye-catching stands for our NAMM booth, Tim and his crew knocked it out of the park. For the CS-80, we need something like the original Yamaha stand, something that'll hold up to 220 pounds. So I sent Tim some dimensions and let him take it from there. And he sure created something beautiful. It's collapsible, very sturdy, very lightweight, and the polished aluminum is gorgeous.
Isn't that cool? Yeah, I like the cross beams.
That came out great. So pretty.
Yeah.
Pick it up too, see what it weighs.
Yeah, it's barely anything. It's nice.
It's pretty cool. With our CS-80 repaired and calibrated, now it's time for the exciting stuff. Getting to know it and getting to really play it. It has so many cool features, and I'm thinking Vangelis was right. This certainly is at least one of the best synth designs ever. Filters are usually thought of as the most distinctive part of a synthesizer's sound character, and the CS-80 has independent high-pass and low-pass filters, each with resonance. And while the filters aren't edgy and squelchy like an MS-20, or self-resonating like just about every other synthesizer, they're really smooth and beautiful, and the combination of the high-pass and low-pass together is a very recognizable CS character. A ring modulator is not unique to the CS-80, but this one is so musical and so playable that you could get lost for hours just ring modulating. Now, check out the ribbon controller, which lets you do some very cool pitch tricks. Again, the CS-80 isn't the only synth with a ribbon controller, but Yamaha's is pretty unique. Wherever you touch it, that becomes the 0 point of your pitch excursions. Then you can bend upward an octave, or you can bend downward by about 4 city blocks. This single controller is definitely addicting. And while just about every synthesizer ever made has portamento, The CS-80 can also be switched to glissando mode, where glides occur in halftone pitch steps. How cool is that? When Michael Jackson's Thriller exploded onto the scene in 1982, the Yamaha CS-80 was used prominently on a number of tracks. Most of the keyboard work on the album was done by studio musicians. But according to internet rumor, the main synth riff on Billie Jean was played on a CS-80 by Michael Jackson himself. To get the inside scoop on this, I called up someone who was there, Michael Boddicker, one of the main keyboardists on Thriller.
Hi, Rich, how are you?
I'm doing good. How are you?
Good, I'm just...
I gotta tell you, it's cool to talk to the person who created so many of the classic keyboard tracks we've all heard. So I asked about Billie Jean in the CS-80. My understanding is that Michael Jackson played that for the riff on Billie Jean. And that's internet rumor, at least. And so I wanted to talk to someone who was there to kind of straighten things out.
I was there. I set up the sound for him.
But as it turns out, Michael Jackson wasn't the only one playing that riff.
We multi-tracked that. We had a CS-80, which was not MIDI-able, and that had two sets of sounds going. So we had two banks of the pulse width modulation type of string sound. And if I remember correctly, Steve and David had already been there. And then I came in and we did a chordal emulator sound. Then we did a Prophet, and then there'd be the CS-80 where I'm doing that same kind of pulse width modulation string. And then after I had already layered parts on there, Michael wanted to play the CS-80. So there were already, Greg Phillips is on the track, David Pace is on the track, Steve Picaro's on the track, Michael Boddicker's on the track, and Michael wanted to play a part. And I set up the sound for him, changed it up a little bit, and I showed him how to play the part.
And so what I was going to do is try to recreate that in person and just play that little riff on the CS-80 here.
When you play it, you're playing the bottom note with the index finger of your left hand, and then you're taking your index finger and your third finger on the right hand and playing the upper two notes, and that's how it was performed by Michael Jackson.
So I can't play with one hand?
No, it wasn't played with one hand. It was played with two hands.
So yes, Michael Jackson did indeed play the Billie Jean riff himself on a CS-80. But it was one layer of probably 5 that were used to create the final sound. And MJ's track was laid down after those other similar tracks were already recorded. The sound you hear in Billie Jean is actually several different tracks of several different synthesizers layered together to get a big sound. So on the CS-80, for the Synth 1 program I'm going to start with a square wave. And then I'm going to change the pulse width, give it a narrower pulse. And then to get some animation, I'm going to give it pulse width modulation. The other critical parts of the sound are the filter cutoff. It's kind of a dark sound. And then a fairly quick attack time and a bit of release time. And with that dialed in, I just eyeballed a fairly similar setting for Synth 2. We don't want it to sound identical, just pretty close. And so there's my Synth 2 sound. There's Synth 1. And so now we'll just mix those together. And that's pretty much it. To play it like Michael Jackson though, I have to use the chopsticks method. But otherwise, I'm going to play it with my right hand so that I can also play the bass note that Greg Fillinganes played on a Rhodes 88. We've taken this Yamaha CS-80 from a high-mileage broken synthesizer that smoked when it was powered on to a refurbished fantastic instrument that feels and plays as good as new. It's such an amazingly expressive keyboard, and holy cow does it sound good. Out of all the synthesizers that we've gone through here at Syntaur, I've never wanted to keep one as badly as I want to keep this one. But keeping them doesn't pay the bills, so we'll see how that goes. Either way, it's been a heck of a journey, and it's easy to see why the Yamaha CS-80 is on top of the list of Syntaur's 7 deadly synths. You gonna do the moonwalk for us?
Yeah, it's enough.
Are you gonna do the moonwalk? You want to
Yeah, I'm gonna moonwalk y'all ass. I'm gonna walk y'all ass right out to moonwalk y'all ass right out on into the yard somewhere. Y'all be moonwalking off to Mars somewhere before you get to moonwalking.
Well, folks, we're here at an undisclosed location in the Phoenix area, and we're delivering something of great significance to Synth Wizards. It's Cody. He recently got his degree in computer science, took a job out here, and now he's moving on to browner pastures. Cody's the one that for a long time pushed for Syntaur to do a video series, and Synth Wizards is the result of that. We're mighty proud of him, but we're sure gonna miss him.